Okay, so let's take a little bit of the mystery and intimidation factor out of gluing up a fingerboard if you haven't done that before. In this case, ebony fingerboard gluing onto a mahogany neck blank. You can see the pearl that's going to go in this one, and I have roughed out where the inlays go. Everything on the guitar is built around the center line. So with that center line of the neck and the center line of the fingerboard lined up, I'm going to clamp the board in place temporarily. Then I'm going to drill some pilot holes for a 1/16 drill bit, and I'm just going to temporarily leave in place. I'm going to do one on the body end of the neck and one on the headstock end of the neck. So I want to be careful here. I do tend to drill these closer to the center line than farther away, but you don't want to be right on top of the truss rod, which is already inlaid in this neck blank. And you don't want to be too close to the edge, because then if you go too deep, that hole is going to show out the back of the neck when you carve the neck. So you definitely don't want that either. See, I actually wanted that a little farther up, but the drill was contacting the clamp. Not too big a deal. It's not really vital where these are, so just need two to mark the location, so it wasn't a big deal to just move that up a fret. I also prefer this method a little bit, where you put the drill bit in and you leave it for just a moment, and then after things have settled, you pull it out. This ensures that there's nothing left in the neck that could damage a future luthier's fret saw or something like that. I know I personally would be very unhappy if I went to do a refret on this thing at some point in the future and my expensive fret slot saw got damaged because a metal pin was left inside the neck. And here you can see how that's going to work. Just have the 1/16 drill bit going through the ebony and just barely into the mahogany. You don't really need to be very deep right there. I find it best to prep everything that's needed and get it at hand before you get glue drying. So I'm going to use Titebond for this. There's a lot of arguments for and against Titebond, but I like it. That's what I'm going to use. And you will see me also gathering all the clamps that I have. Not all of them that I have, but all that I'm going to need for this job. And then I get, here I'm grabbing my 12-inch radius caul as well. This is not needed, but I like it just to distribute the force of the clamps a little bit better, and I can use a few fewer clamps. So this neck has a StewMac hot rod truss rod in it. I prefer these truss rods, and when I install them, I prefer to route the channel a little bit deeper than needed, and then I put a filler strip over so that I can spread glue over the entirety of that surface, and I don't have any spaces at all without glue underneath the fingerboard there. And all I did right there with a pencil was just roughly mark out where I was going to need glue, because the fingerboard is not as wide as the neck blank. I'm just going for an even spread here. Now, you could do glue on both surfaces. I really don't think it's necessary. I just do the glue on the one surface. I don't know that it is beneficial or not to put any glue on both surfaces. I've done it both ways in the past, and I don't know that one is any better than the other. Okay, so speeding through a little bit of this, all I'm doing is spreading glue here, making sure I have enough. Alright, so now that my glue is down, it's just a matter of lining up those drill bits, letting them act as indexing pins. So I had a little trouble with lining them up, actually. I think the wood glue swelled the mahogany slightly, so it was kind of difficult to get those inserted, but it was not too big a deal. Okay, so with the indexing pins in, it's time to start clamping. I'll start with my radius caul in the center of the neck. Just getting all these clamps in place. I think it is worth mentioning that you will see me use quite a few clamps here, but I'm not trying to get a ton of pressure on this thing. I just need even pressure. I'm trying to get a good, consistent glue joint along the whole length of that fingerboard, which is hard to do on a 18 or 20 inch fingerboard and a 1/2 inch circle on the end of your clamp. So it takes quite a bit to distribute that force out. So yeah, not going for excessive force here, just going for even pressure along the whole length. So in this case here, the vast majority of the fingerboard prep work has already been done. This thing is already radiused, and it needs some final sanding, but it's not in rough shape at all. So I don't anticipate having to do a lot more machining and leveling and sanding to this fingerboard, so I don't want to dent it. So anytime that I'm using a clamp directly on the board, I'm choosing clamps from my collection that still have the pads on the end of the clamp. I think you guys get the idea here. I'll speed through the rest. The only thing that I will mention here is you do want to make sure that you see a really nice consistent bead of squeeze out along the entire edge of the joint. If you don't see that consistent bead of squeeze out, then you're going to have a gap somewhere in the joint where you don't have glue between the two pieces of wood. Okay, so the nut for the guitar is going to rest against the mahogany right here, and this is my best opportunity to get that clean. So I'm going to need to take a wet towel and get that off with just a little bit of water and the towel and a little bit of scrubbing, and all that glue squeeze out right there will be gone. It's probably a good idea to follow this up about 5 minutes later and do it again, because you will get a small amount of glue continue to squeeze out over the first couple minutes of gluing. And I'm not worried about all that on the sides, because the majority of that is going to be bandsawed off, and what isn't will be routed off. So I'm not really concerned about the squeeze out down the sides of the fingerboard. Slight screw up on my part here that I'll have to fix later. It's not too big a deal, but I wish I had spotted it beforehand. I'll have to free up a little bit of space around that on the bottom of the fingerboard for the truss rod nut to spin freely. I don't need a lot of space, but it'll need a little bit. So if you'll recall, earlier in the video I mentioned that these drill bit indexing pins are temporary. After the first few minutes of clamping, this thing is set up enough that I can remove these. So I'll just reach in there with the pliers and yank them out. I have forgotten to do this before and been afraid that I was going to break a drill bit off inside the neck. But in those cases, these things came free. I guess the wood glue didn't stick to the metal, and I've yet to have a major issue with that. But yeah, it's a good idea to go ahead and get these out now. Thanks to everyone that made it this far in the video. Hope this helped you out in your guitar building journeys. There's nothing really left at this point but to let this dry and take it out of the clamps. Truly appreciate all of y'all. Have a good day.